Emma, I'm practicing for how I give feedback to writers, and I want to share what I'm doing in this document with the teachers that are going to be in my class. So, the first thing that I teach them is that if somebody reads, as a teacher, they read the paper aloud to the student, then that shares with them how they are thinking and understanding what the student has written about. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read it aloud and I'm going to pause when I need to and make comments and think about what it is that you're explaining. Lab report for pollution in the watershed. Sounds like that's an important topic because our Ogallala aquifer is that's where we get most of our water. And if the watershed is polluted, it's going to end up polluting the Ogallala aquifer too. The purpose of this lab is to examine how changes in the environment can change the watershed and how pollution from factories and acid rain can pollute the watershed. So you're talking about three different things here in one sentence. So you're talking about the changes of the watershed, you're talking about pollution, and you're talking about acid rain. It was kind of hard to keep track of how many different things there were because it just kept going on and on. So I had to reread that. This shows how human activity can affect the watershed. So I'm wondering what shows the human activity. In the procedure, I observed, well, it reads like this. In the procedure, I observed how non-point and point source pollution enters and flows through the watershed. But I think you meant in the procedure, I observed how non-point and point source pollution enters and flows through the watershed. And I'm wondering, I've never heard of that non-point and point source pollution. So I'm kind of wondering what that means. I recorded the observation in table A in the data. Table A is data. So I'm not sure what that means. I watched how a freshwater source is contaminated with pollution. And I'm wondering what you recorded. What were your observations? And I'm wondering if you're going to include Table A in this report. In the final experiment, I didn't know that there were more than one experiment, so I'm wondering what the other experiments were. In the final experiment, I observed what happens to biotic factors in the food chain when the population changed. So it sounds like this experiment is different from human activity that you're talking about in the first paragraph. I read about the animal food chain. I had to drag the correct biotic factors into the right food chain in the lab guide. I watched how pollution, drought, non-native plants, and runoff can have the antibiotic or biotic factors in the watershed by increasing or decreasing the environment of the biotic factors. So I'm not really even sure what that means. If it increased, what happened to the antibiotic and biotic? And if it decreased, what happened to the antibiotic or biotic? So, and what about the environment increased or decreased? I'm kind of confused there. I've learned that an environmental change can affect a watershed and causes the trout, oh, you're getting very specific here, and cause the trout to move to different streams. A plant from a different region can make compounds that prevent algae from growing. Okay, I'm wondering how that's related to the trout and the And are you saying something about the environmental change with this? Chemicals that enter the stream cause fish eggs to be deformed and die. So now we're talking about the fish again. So that might need to be together with the fish. When additional runoff enters the river, okay, so it really states this. When additional runoff enters the river, it contains, I didn't say that right. Let me do it again. When additional runoff enters the river, it can contain nutrients that algae use to grow and reproduce. What I think you meant was to say when additional runoff enters the river, it can contain nutrients that algae use to grow and reproduce. And so I'm wondering what you're explaining about that. Is that good or bad? Is that the impact? What impact does that have on the other things in the food chain? And then you say humankind can help or destroy a watershed. So that sounds like it belongs in a new paragraph because that doesn't have anything to do with all the rest of the sentences that are in there. Food chain. That's a nice clipping of it in there. I like the information the lab showed us on how human activity, drought, and acid rain can affect our world. It showed how pollution can destroy our environment. If I could make this better, I would show where problems with pollution occur in our world today. So I'm not sure that you explained how it destroyed the environment. And if you're making it better, is it that you're showing where the problems are? Is that going to make it better just to know where? So I'm wondering why you're saying that. Um, I'm going to have to think some more about what best way you could write a lab report because I think what would help the most here is having something that had a sequence in it that you're able to organize it in a way that keeps all the ideas separate. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. So I'm going to research that as a solution for you now.